Hello and welcome to the lecture on vowels. So far we looked at consonants, and we looked at the IPA, and we looked at the IPA symbols for the consonants. Now we're going to be adding in the vowels. Vowels and consonants do have a big fundamental difference. Basically, consonants have some kind of constriction of the vocal tract, whereas vowels have a very, very open vocal tract. So you may have noticed, or you may remember, that when we were looking at consonants, we had some consonants that had more constriction of the vocal tract than others, and some consonants that had more openness to the vocal tract. For example, the liquids and the glides had quite an open vocal tract. Some people kind of think of liquids and glides as being vowel-like consonants, but because they do have some constriction of the vocal tract, they're still considered consonants. So these vowels are going to be having a very open vocal tract, and that's what's going to distinguish them from the consonants. There are a few different properties of vowels, so these kind of correspond to things like places and manner of articulation that we were talking about with consonants. So with consonants, we described them by place, by manner. We described them by voicing, so voiceless or voiced. With vowels, we describe them by the height of the tongue in the mouth when we say it. So we have high vowels, mid vowels, and low vowels. So the tongue is either high in the mouth, mid in the mouth, or low in the mouth. Then we have what's called the backness. So we have vowels that are back, central, and front. So basically vowels that are said with the tongue in the back of the mouth, the middle of the mouth, or the front of the mouth. And we can have combinations of height and backness. So we can have a high front vowel, we can have a low back vowel, a high central vowel, and whatever combination there. Vowels can also be, to some extent, described by rounding of the lips. So if our lips are rounded when we say them, so you can kind of think of that as like kind of forming the letter O with your lips, and that would be rounding. So vowels can be rounded or unrounded. And then they're also described by tenseness or laxness. So a tense vowel would be one where the tongue and other muscles in the mouth are very tense, and then a lax vowel would be where they are a bit more relaxed. So vowel height is one of the main ways to distinguish between different types of vowels. In English, we have a few different high vowels. The high vowels in English typically correspond to the sounds you might think of as described by the letter I, or the letter U, or two O's in a row sometimes. So we have in English 4 different high vowel sounds. We have the E sound that you hear in beat or bleed or see or fleece. This is represented by the symbol right here, kind of a lowercase letter I. We also have this sound here is also a high vowel. This is represented by the kind of looks somewhat like a capital I. So this is the I sound. So this is the sound we hear in sit, fin, lip, or kit. Then we have this sound that is here represented by the letter U. So this is the sound that we hear in boot, mood, soon, or goose. So a oo sound. And then we have this sound that's represented by a Greek letter right here. This sound is something like You hear this in foot, could, hood, or book. We also have a lot of mid vowels in English. So here we have a sound represented by the letter E. So try to remember that with the IPA, we frequently won't necessarily have the same sound represented by the letter in the IPA and in English. They may be different sounds for the IPA in English. So the mid-vowels here, this one represented by the letter E actually makes a kind of A sound. So in your elementary school classes, you may have heard that called the long A. Here we are calling it a certain type of mid-vowel. So here, this A is something you hear in late, rain, paid, or face. This one here, represented by another Greek letter, is an E sound. So we hear this in read, send, peck, or dress. This here, you may have seen before and may have heard it called the schwa. This is the first sound we have in about or ago. It's a very short, abbreviated vowel sound. Pretty much the most neutral mid-vowel sound you can have. Then we have this, represented by a kind of an upside-down V. This is a sound. You hear it in rut, mud, up, or strut. Then we have a sound represented by the letter O. So this sound is O. So this is mode, lone, so, and goat. And then this sound that's represented by something that looks like a backwards C. So in some dialects of English, you'd hear this in caught, dawn, law, or thought. This is a sound that sounds something like aw. So the mid-vowels, in terms of height in English, are typically going to be something like the sounds you might think of as the letter E or the letter O, so like a long A, long O, that kind of thing would be a mid-vowel. So A, O, those will be the stereotypical mid-vowels. Then we have the low vowels. These are all represented by some variant on the English letter A. So we have this symbol here. This is the sound you hear in hot, mop, rock, or lot, the aw. Then we have this, represented by kind of a smash up of the letter A and E. This is the sound you hear in cat, man, or trap, so kind of a sound. Then we have this other sound represented by like a letter A. This is in a type of sound called a diphthong. So we will see these in a second, but in English, we hear this in the words ride or file, so this is a very sounding sound. So if you kind of open your mouth and say like at the dentist or something, that is probably the closest thing to this sound. So accent differences in English typically come from vowels. So in English, in most dialects, our pronunciation of consonants is fairly consistent across these different dialects. It's the pronunciation of vowels that is really what tells you the differences between someone's accents. So in some dialects of English, the word dawn, so kind of like, when the sun first rises in the morning, and then the name dawn, D-O-N, have the same vowel, this vowel. In other dialects of English, they actually have different sounds. So this dawn, and this dawn have kind of different vowels. The way I say them, I guess you can try to judge for yourself if I say dawn and dawn the same way. But you may be someone who has these two different sounds when you say these two words. Or you may say them the same way. If you say them the same way, you have what's called a low-back merger. So we have these two vowel sounds that are made low and back in the mouth. So they've kind of merged together. Or you might have the low-back contrast in which you still say these two different vowels separately. Okay, so we looked at kind of the height of the different vowels, where the E and U sounds were kind of back vowels. The A sounds were kind of central. And then the O sounds were also kind of central, and then the ah sounds were kind of low. So we also have what's called backness, which we mentioned before. So the back vowels here might be high in the mouth. So the oo and the oo type sounds are going to be high. The o sounds are going to be mid, and the ah sounds are going to be low. So this set of sounds here, the oos, the os, and the ahs, and the different types of them, are going to be made pretty far back in the mouth. The central sounds, so like the schwa and the ah and the are going to be very much central in the mouth. So these sounds here are the set of central vowels in English. Then we have the E and the A sounds. These are made with the tongue very far forward in the mouth in English. So you can try to even do a little experiment here. Try saying like E, oo, and you may notice how your tongue moves from the front of the mouth with E to the back of the mouth when you say oo. Or if you say E, O, you may notice how, or E, A, you may notice how your tongue moves from the top of the mouth with E more towards the bottom when you say A. So these vowels can also be described as tense or lax. So basically, this just means how relaxed or how tensed are the muscles in the mouth when you're saying this. So for this set of vowels here, E and oo and A and O, we have a relatively tense muscle structure in the mouth when we're saying those. With the I, the oo, the E, and the ah, we have a much more relaxed or a lax muscle structure in the mouth when we're saying these. We also have what's called rounded vowels. So basically the vowels that we say with relatively rounded lips. So oo and o, your lips are pretty rounded when you say those. German and French also have some rounded vowels if you've studied those. So this is one example there. So one other thing to talk about when we talk about vowels is what's called a diphthong. Basically, this means we have something that's acting like one vowel sound, but really it's two. This is kind of like the affricates when we were looking at the consonants. These are usually considered to be kind of one sound, but really it's two sounds acting like one. They're just sounds that are so connected together that they've kind of become like one vowel. So in English, we have I, we have ow, and we have oi. So the I diphthong, ah and I, we have pi, we have rai, and we have like. We have the ow, we have cow, how, and round. So we have ah and and then we have oi, so we have ah and e. So we have boy, coin, and boil. So these sounds are all really two sounds, but they happen so often together that they might act like one. So these are called diphthongs. So we've looked at kind of the different vowels, and I have put up a vowel chart for you on the Learn website. It's used essentially like the consonant chart. So if you are having trouble figuring out the vowel or consonant charts, do not forget to contact me. Try to figure out how to use those charts before you take the quiz, because they should be pretty useful for the quiz, I think. So if you're having trouble, just make sure you contact me. We do have one more little lecture for this week. I know there's been more this week than last week. Like I mentioned before, I think this is probably the hardest week in terms of new material. There's just a lot of it. But don't worry if you're having trouble. Make sure you contact me if you are, and I will try to help you out as best I can. So kind of moving on, we'll look at how we use the IPA to transcribe full words.